Unnecessary intro song to totally waste your time. So I just got done watching the Devo documentary on Netflix. Brand new. And I just have to say that it was a very self-reflective moment for me, and it explains a lot about my life, and there's some things that are just really kind of make me a little bit angry about it, quite frankly. Because I was such a huge Devo fan, and Devo affected my life in such a way that I actually lied and said for many years that I discovered them much earlier than I did. Like I wrote stories. I've told this before, but one of the most embarrassing things about life is, for me, has been to go back and read journals of mine that I wrote allegedly, privately, where I was just lying, because I didn't want reality to be in print. I wanted to rewrite history to reflect well upon myself, as a child. We're talking about a 13-year-old kid lying in his journal, And, I did that. I wrote a story, I don't know, back in the early 2000s about Devo and how they changed my life, And it was true in that they did change my life, but I tried to make it look like they changed my life when I was in junior high, which is probably when I heard Whip It the first time. And so I wasn't totally lying, but I didn't really become a big Devo fan until later, until Oh No, It's Devo came out. And then that album was so good that I went back and bought the others, But, I rewrote history to include them in my life. That's the extent of how much they affected my life, is that I rewrote my own story and lied about it to make them even more influential in my life. But, as I've gotten older and I've been writing songs, top down, lyrics and music first, I'm realizing how much of my time was spent not really listening to lyrics, that mostly I was affected by the sounds of things, not all, but with that music especially. With Devo, sure, I could get the words from certain songs and the choruses and, but mostly I was listening to the rhythms, the guitars, the strange things, the visuals, and everything else. And I wasn't really picking up on the lyrics. Like, for example, in this documentary, there's a lot of the lyrics going by. And like me being supposedly one of the biggest Devo fans ever, some of the lyrics, I'm like, I never knew he was saying that, Or I maybe read them once before a long time ago, but anyway, if you watch the thing, it turns out that Devo has just always been a very bitter, arrogant band who really just thinks of themselves as smarter than everybody else. The concept is de-evolution. Their opinion coming out of Kent State was that humanity sucked, that life on planet Earth sucked, that most people suck, that advertising sucked, the wars sucked, everything sucked except for them. They were above it all, And most of the thing is going back and forth between interviews of Mark Mothersbaugh, who ended up composing a bunch of other films, and he's had quite a career after post-Devo, and Jerry Casale, whose career hasn't been quite as good. He's directed some ads and whatever. But what I find is that the darker of the two is Jerry Casale, and that's what I've seen from him. most of the time. But anyway, in this documentary, they just go on to describe how the whole point of Devo was subversion, was to subvert, was to implant this really dark, negative view of life on Earth into the minds of kids. Like, they literally come out and say it. And I'm going, that's me they're talking about. I was one of those kids, you know? And they did plant those ideas in my mind. They did. I look back and I just go, holy shit, is that where I got my sense of superiority? You know? From them, which came first? I don't know. Did they appeal to me because I too felt the same way as they did? And I don't think I did. One of the most offensive things about this, documentary is these guys are all fully grown men now. They're at least 10 years older than me. I'm 58. And you would think that I'm baffled by old people who represent the same things they represented when they were 20. Like, I see this, or one of the reasons why I don't hang around with a lot of people, including people my own age, is I find that a lot of people don't. They don't want to embrace getting older, evolving, changing ideas, evolving. Literally, they're called de-evolution. Talk about tying a weight around your ankle, around your neck when you're young, committing to a message. The world is getting worse. It's terrible. And we're subverting the system and wanting to implant these ideas in your mind. It's just like, okay, yeah, and you did it. And now what? Now what? Why did you want to convince people the world was bad? Because in that question, like, was I drawn to them because of that? Because I also had this, superior sense of myself that everybody else is stupid. Look, I see that shit in myself now, and I don't like it. When I feel a sense of superiority, it's hard to not be honest about it. Like when I talk about how I don't want to hang out with people, I only want to hang out with critters and plants. Is that a sense of superiority? I don't know. I don't really feel like it is. It's just that when I'm around people, the only time I ever experience loneliness is when I'm around people. If I'm not around people, I don't experience feelings of loneliness or alienation. Anyway, but so there's a lot of things going in my mind about this documentary, But again, one of the things that makes me kind of sad about it, and it's sad for me to see other people my age that don't want to progress. They want to represent the same things the clinging to youth, I don't understand that at all because for whatever reason, my view of nostalgia has never been sentimental or good. For me, looking back gives me a sick feeling in my stomach, always, about anything. Remembering, even if I'm remembering good times, it makes me feel empty. The longing for the past is a feeling that doesn't edify me. Reminiscing on the past, it doesn't edify me. Revisiting old things, looking through journals, even listening to, if I make a recording and I listen to something, listen to it again 20 minutes later somehow, like when for a minute, because of this app I thought that I had to listen to the whole thing again in order to get the subtitles right and put them in the right place. Turns out I can fast forward and do it without listening to it, and that's what I'm doing now, because even listening to myself 20 minutes later is too much past for me. That's, even then it's too much reminiscing. So I don't know why. I don't know why I don't. Maybe you guys, some of you guys feel that way about the past. I don't know. It seems like to me when I look out at the world, I see a lot of people that look back at the past as their glory days, and those are the good old days. And I kind of wish I could feel that way, but I just don't, for whatever reason. So Because I like change. I like growth. I like nothing feels better to me than realizing that you've made a mistake and changing it, or changing your mind about something, adopting a better way of being, rather than having to, again, hang that weight of self-definition. I can't even listen to people that self-define themselves. I'm the type of person that, and I just want to go, stop. Don't say it. Don't say it. Because you can be any kind of person you want to be. And whatever way you've defined yourself, you've probably imprisoned yourself with that definition. Unless, of course, the definition is, I'm great, I'm awesome, and I love life. You know what I mean? But anyway, so I'm watching this interview of these guys who are, they say never meet your heroes. The thing is, I have met them too. I ended up having a friend, or a colleague, I should say, end up being their drummer for just up until recently, Josh Freese. He ended up drumming, a studio drummer, drums for everybody, but he became Devo's drummer, Foo Fighters drummer, got fired, Nine Inch Nails. He drums for everybody, right? Not a guy that I know well. He's a friend of a friend, that kind of thing. But it was just kind of surreal. But when I was suddenly invited to hang out with the band and go to their shows, and these guys are my heroes, and that's kind of when the masks first started to slip, I just kind of realized, having a conversation directly with, I never had a real conversation with any of them. I can't say that it was real conversations, but short conversations with Jerry Casal, and he's one of the main guys. He's the darker of the two. And I picked up on that even when I talked with him years ago, and my friend was playing with their band, and I was backstage and taking photographs of them and stuff. But I was like going, oh man, these guys are not fun. It's not humor. There wasn't the humor. I saw the videos as being funny and interesting and weird and crazy and unusual, and but I didn't, because I'm a dumb person, I guess. I didn't pick up on the absolute darkness of it, and the bitterness, the resentment, and that's kind of, again, you kind of got to be fair. I got to be fair. You look at old pictures of them when they were young, and we all look pretty good when we're young, but there was this real bitterness that they had towards beautiful people, symmetrical people. They weren't. They're long necks, big Adam's apples, big noses, angular faces, kind of, some, but not your average, not the type of people that get looks and privilege on the street, So I can understand how somebody's survival mechanisms would kick in, and instead of, I can see how somebody would be resentful of that, of beautiful people that are tan with nice skin, nice hair, nice physiques, I can see why the nerds get upset, and I don't know why. I kind of, maybe I identified with that too, even though, I look back at photographs of me right now, and I don't really qualify as that nerdy thing. I was never a super handsome man, but I was certainly never an ugly guy, I was a solid 7, slightly, I don't know. Anyway, too much self-analysis on that shit. But so I can understand it, but at what point do you grow out of it? At what point do you realize that your version, that you're living your life, you're going on tour, you're spending time and effort at every turn subverting, and your mission is to convince people that life is not good. Their song, "It's a Beautiful World," is sarcastic. It's a beautiful world for you, but not for me. The video is, war and everything ugly and dark about humanity is in this song, you know? And I get it. I felt that way. I told this story about how when I was in junior high and they had a World's Fair, everybody had to pick a country and then do a book report. And then they had a World's Fair where they opened up the dividers between the classrooms and everybody would set up a table, and most people did their own heritage, you know. Like one girl was from Holland, and she was dressed like Holland. One girl was Portuguese, and American Indian guy, whatever. And I picked the country of Chad, mostly because I had a stepbrother named Chad. And I showed up in a loincloth with no shirt, and I had just a table with dirt on it. I was making a big political statement, you know. Things are miserable for Chad. I was a social justice warrior right from the get-go, you know. So there is this sense of, you know, I even look back at some of the poetry and writings that I wrote back then, and there was a sense that, and this is why I'm kind of a little bit upset at Devo right now, is because that was a force acting upon me. And they admit it in this documentary that they were doing it intentionally. I was a young boy, you know, and I was also listening to Crystal Gale and Kenny Rogers and Michael Jackson, the Sylvesters, and music and Henry Mancini. And I was very edified by that kind of music, you know, very beautiful, you know. All by myself, Engelbert Humperdinck, is that who the guy that sang it? You know, Cry My Eyes, I'll listen to that. Casey and the Sunshine Band, Please Don't Go. Oh my God, tore my heart out. But there was all this beautiful music that I was taking in too, you know. There's so much beautiful, wonderful music that's from all ages and from all categories that I was listening to and just really feeling it. I'm a sensitive little fucker, so whatever, you know. I was feeling the music. But then along comes Devo, and they hate all that shit. That shit's stupid. They're saying this as adults now, too. You know, I get it when they're young, because I did that when I was young, you know. I took a shit on things, but now, after watching this documentary, I'm going, did those motherfuckers turn me into that guy? You know? Again, I'm not going to sit here and blame them, but when you hear people you really admired and who really influenced you and really did have an effect on your life, outwardly saying, our point was to subvert and get into the minds of kids about this dark message of de-evolution, that life on planet Earth is not that great. Ronald Reagan sucks. Everybody that's conservative sucks. If you're handsome and you play football and you're a cowboy, you suck. You know? Like when you look at the things you thought were humorous about the Whip It video, and you realize that no, there's a part in the documentary where an interviewer is asking him, so how much fun are you guys are having? Or how much of this is humor? Or just a joke? And they're all just sitting there going, none of this is a joke. We're totally serious. And I'm thinking, they really are. They were really bitter, miserable people that wanted the rest of the world to be bitter and miserable. That was their mission. That human beings are no better than apes, cannibalistic monkeys. That Christianity and Christians were stupid and ignorant. You know what I mean? Of course, I went down that path, didn't I? You know? And I'm not saying that I'm some big Christian or anything right now, but, you know, I'm just saying that the power, this is one of the reasons why I don't share music. One of the things that I ponder so much now as I'm older is just the power of music and the power of art, especially when you can have media distribute it to people and then you're not really accountable to them, you know? It almost feels like it's wrong to influence people that you're not accountable to. You know, like Devo. They influenced me. They weren't accountable to me. You know? They didn't have to manage all the decisions I might have made. Who knows how many of the decisions I made in my life. When I'm watching them, I'm thinking, oh my God, here I am been thinking I'm this individualistic free thinker when half the things that they're saying in this documentary are ideas that I thought that I had on my own. But when you hear somebody saying, no, we were intentionally planting these ideas in your head. And when I think back of thinking I wasn't really listening to the lyrics, but I was when I was listening to Crystal Gale and Eddie Rabbit, Just You and I, you know, fucking beautiful song, still just gorgeous, you know. I was listening to the lyrics with She Believes in Me, Kenny Rogers, absolutely gorgeous, heartbreaking song, you know. I was listening to the lyrics with a lot of good music, you know, edifying, uplifting music. But I wasn't really listening it to them because they sang it so fast and in a weird voice. But I can look and I watch this documentary and I go, gosh, I adopted that point of view. You know? At some point in my life, I started talking shit or wouldn't admit that I liked Kenny Rogers or Lionel Richie or the Commodores. You know? At a certain point, I convinced myself I didn't like it, and I wouldn't even allow myself to like some beautiful stuff. Like, how many times did I make fun of Air Supply and REO Speedwagon? You know? How much, and why? Why? My peers didn't all do that. A lot of people just were allowed to go on in their merry life and, you know, enjoy beautiful things, acknowledge beauty, relish in it. I even look back at the art that I made, you know. My mom would ask me, why don't you make beautiful things? You have so much talent. Why don't you make beautiful things? Why do you make these ugly little characters and stuff? And for me, the real truth is that I thought they were funny. And I liked the humor and the discomfort, you know. And quite frankly, beauty is harder to make. Making things lopsided and disjointed and uncomfortable. You know, I do still enjoy that stuff. The aesthetic of it is I still find humorous and enjoyable. But hopefully the end result is that you laugh at your discomfort. You know, hopefully when you find the absurdity in complaining about life, you opt to not be that way, to not dwell that way, to actually embrace beauty. You know, at least that's maybe what I'm trying to convince myself of now. But yeah, it's just, you know, I had a conversation with another friend of mine that we were talking about Oingo Boingo, another band that I just loved. I just loved them. Oingo Boingo, yes. But then I was recently going over the lyrics, and it's like straight up, how is Danny Elfman not in prison? I love little girls. But she's a little too little. I mean, it's not even, it's like literally talking about, not she's only 17, but maybe she's 11 in that song. You know what I mean? I don't know, man. And the whole time I was listening to it, I was just thinking, this is fun. This is cool. You know, this is awesome. You know, I'm smart. This is intellectual. You know, you're smart. You're cool if you like this stuff. Not Crystal Gale and Eddie Rabbit singing about love. Christopher Cross, Sailing. Pfft, that's wimpy music, You want to listen to cool stuff. Violent Femmes, that even sounds cool. Kiss off into the air behind my back, But it's just, if you break down the music, it's like I would defend Devo if somebody would have said that earlier, and I'm sure people did, I'd be like, you guys are you're out of control. They're just having fun. It's just fun. It's crazy. It's weird. Look how fun it is to dance crazy like a robot and, dress different. But then when you hear it coming out of their own mouths that they weren't having fun, they were angry, they were bitter, they were resentful of beauty. They wanted to be anti-beauty. That was the point, to not be beautiful, to mock beauty. That's what the Warhol movement was about too, to elevate that which is not beautiful, and to mock that which is beautiful. It's subversion, it's inversion too, The fact is, Devo, guys, I know you want to believe that everything's getting worse, but that's not true. Some things are getting worse. You're getting older. Your bones are getting creakier, Your wiener might not work as the same as it used to. But hopefully you're enjoying critters and plants more. And you're finding more beauty in the world as you're getting older. I sensed at the end of the documentary, and I've sensed this for kind of a long time, I've sensed that Jerry Casale is a kind of a tyrant leader of that group, even though it seems like it's Mark Mothersbaugh. I've always wondered why Mark Mothersbaugh, who I always thought was the center of the band, I always wondered why he didn't say more in interviews and he didn't take more charge. But I think it's because Jerry Casale was insecure. He knew that people didn't think he was the lead singer, so he would spend more time, but he was the tyrant. I think he was the intellectual leader of the group. And when I see, anyway, finally at the end of this documentary, I'm watching this whole thing, I'm going, man, these guys are now old. They should be able to have some self-awareness and some self-reflection to go, you know what? Maybe what we did wasn't good. And there's a moment where Mark does that. Mark goes, we were predicting that things were going to get bad, and then Beavis and Butthead, and they talk about all these things. They show clips of Jackass, people getting kicked in the nuts, and he kind of seems to be going, did we usher this in? Like he seems to have a little moment of self-reflection, but I don't think Netflix really wanted that. Jerry Casale doesn't seem to have any self-reflection. He seems to be doubling down, even in his own age, that he was right, and America does suck, and Reagan was terrible, and I'm sure he hates Trump. He's Jihad Jerry now. He's a clown now. I mean, it's just like, never meet your heroes, I'm telling you. But Mark at the very end kind of goes, and we spent that much life talking about how things are bad. And it's the very last sentence of the documentary. He goes, I'm hoping maybe I can spend the rest of my life focusing on how to be positive. And I'm like, okay, finally, I mean, I guess whenever you come around to it, I come around to it later too. It kind of took until, it was when my offspring, my kid, moved down to San Francisco when I realized how dark San Francisco was. When you suddenly see your own flesh and blood, and you see the vultures surrounding the dark forces sort of encircle them, and you start to realize, oh my God, I saw it. I finally saw it when I didn't know I was in it, but I saw it, And so I pulled back a lot at that point. And then 2020 comes around, and you really see. And I'm just wondering how Devo doesn't even realize that it's not like they warned It wasn't a warning. It'd be one thing if they were saying, we're warning you about this. You know, don't be like this. I'm sure they might defend themselves and say, you don't get it. We were warning. It's like, but you weren't, though. You were embracing it. You were creating it. You were creating the trajectory. You were pointing your cameras at the things, there's that old thing, don't look where you don't want to go. That old mountain biking thing. Don't look off the side of the cliff or you'll drive off the side of the cliff. Keep your eyes on the trail. Go where you want to go. Point out the things you want to be beautiful. Inspire, But their mission was to deflate people, to de-evolve them, to wake them up because beauty was stupid. Sports are stupid. Bob Seger, he's stupid. All this other music, I'm sure they'd say Crystal Gale was stupid. Eddie Rabbitt's stupid. Neil Young, even though Neil Young liked him, like they liked a few people like David Bowie. The only people that they claimed to like were Ramones and punk rockers and other people who shared the same dark outlook. God, it just makes you wonder. You just, it's just you get it when people are young, It makes sense when you get a couple guys five guys that are just not very good looking. Girls probably not paying much attention to them, Not a lot of options. You can see how they would become bitter. But to actually set out on a mission to make other people miserable because you're miserable, and then as you're an old man, you're still just doubling down on that and saying, you know what? Actually, sorry about that. I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately. Like, I was a big player in the vanity industry with my photography and some of the things that I was doing. Not huge, no Herb Ritz or anything, but I had my moment where I was being talked about and I was influencing people and I saw how it was going and I got associated with this and thank goodness I recognized that I didn't like it and I stopped. And that's one thing to stop. When you realize you're doing something wrong, stop doing it. And, good for you, Merkley, pat yourself on the back for stopping. But I literally sometimes do think, how do you go back and apologize to people? It seems condescending to apologize, go back and go, you know what? That time I took naked pictures of you and photoshopped you to look sultry and all that other kind of stuff. I didn't need to involve you in that. It's condescending because they didn't need to involve me in it either. It's kind of two consenting adults kind of a situation, but sometimes you just do want to I think it's helpful. There's no point in living your life in regret. Regret is dumb. It's dumb to sit there and regret. But there is healthy regret. Healthy regret means, it's learning. It means I've changed. I've grown. I've decided that what I did was not good, and I learned my lesson. And if I'm halfway charitable or virtuous, which is gross to say, it's like you would warn people, right? You'd say, yeah, don't do that. Don't do that thing I did, or do whatever you want. But, I just want to be on record knowing that, I don't think that was good. Those aren't the bright times in my life. Those aren't bright moments. Those aren't moments of joy when you're denigrating beauty or treating things that shouldn't be treated casually. And I think that's the most unsettling part about that documentary is that there's just, besides that very last glimmer of hope where Mark Mothersbaugh seems to want to, he seems to want to accept some responsibility, you know, but, you know, that's the sticky situation. If he does that, he drags in Jerry too, and his brother Bob and Alan Myers. He drags in. You can't really. That's the other part about apologizing for, you know, dragging people into vanity culture. You know, with the photography and stuff like that, dragging people into my stuff. It's like people will either wake up to that stuff or feel that way, you know, and on their own time, you know, and sometimes you can't push things. I don't know, maybe making excuses, but anyway, it was just a real eye-opener, a really kind of, you know, you wanna believe that you're kind of impervious to influence, you know, but man, watching that Devo documentary, I can't seriously say that they really badly influenced me. I think they did. I think they really badly influenced me. I'm not gonna sit here and blame Devo. I'm not gonna sue Devo. You know? But I do feel like if I met Mark Mothersbaugh again, or Jerry, I feel like I would want to say, you know what you did was wrong. It was wrong for you to make me think it wasn't okay to like Crystal Gale and Eddie Rabbitt and the Commodores and Lionel Richie and Kenny Rogers and Air Supply and all these other soft and tender things. And Bob Seger. I don't really like Bob Seger anyway, but maybe I would have. Hell, I'm just half the thing I got to sit here and wonder how many things I don't like because fucking Devo told me not to like them. I'd never admit that. But damn, when you hear it coming out of their face, that that's exactly what they were doing. It's like hearing somebody say, you know that purple shirt you wore on Wednesday? On Tuesday night, I played a tape in your ear at a low volume while you were sleeping. Wear the purple shirt. Wear the purple shirt. You know? You wake up and you go, fuck. I wore the purple shirt because you told me to? Holy shit. How many other things did you whisper in my ear? Well, I thought I was just having a nice time. Anyway, I'm not trying to come down too hard on them. I kind of feel sorry. I honestly do. I kind of feel badly more for Jerry than Mark, because Mark does seem like he kind of worked things out. He's got a fantastic career. But even though he was also saying, you know, that he subversively, and this is another thing that I think I might have gotten from him that I didn't know, but I would subversively put things, when people would hire me for art, rather than being grateful for them hiring me and paying me, I would subvert by hiding sneak messages into the art I would make, kind of making fun of them and kind of mocking them. I mean, that's just, it's fucking lame. I don't care how you put it. Subversion is lame. It's bad. Dare I say, it's evil. If you're going to influence somebody, just tell them. Just be upfront what you're doing. Just state it. Just go, look, I'm sad. I think the world sucks. You know? That way the person can just go, you know what? It's not so bad. Come here. Let me show you a few things. Look at these flowers. Aren't they beautiful? How about this puppy? What about this puppy? You know? What about this device that can make it so somebody can speak to their mom when she's in the hospital over, you know, FaceTime? What about this thing where some people can work now from the beach? You know? I don't know. You can look at the world however you want to. But the thing is, if you subvert and you lie to people, you don't even give them the opportunity to confront your ideas directly. You know, it's such a chicken shit way to do things. Subverting, sneaking ideas into people's minds. You know, rather than just saying, here's my opinion, this is the way I think about things. What do you think? And then you debate things on their merits up front in the open, like good people, instead of this, no, you're too stupid. You're too stupid, you stupid football player, you stupid. I have to trick you. Oh, God, I just think of the times where I thought that was cool. I literally did. I used to think that subversive art was cool. You know? That's not cool. There's nothing cool about subversion. I mean, subvert if you're behind enemy lines and you got to get your family out, you know, sneak around, tell a lie, say you're somebody else so you can, I don't know, avoid being killed by somebody. I don't know. Maybe there's some rationale, but even in that scenario, that movie's that's not nearly as good as a movie that somebody just goes, no, I'm not going to fucking subvert. I'm going to fight you and I'm going to kill you right now, man to man, face to face. And I'm going to tell you exactly why I'm killing you. Is to defend myself from you, you fucking creep. You know? I'm defending my family. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. Eye-opening shit. That's true. I wish them... Well, I mean, I was just going to say, Mark Mothersbaugh was talking about how just recently he was subverting. He always sneaks in this thing called... I don't know. He learned how to say Jesus loves you backward is something like sausages are yummy or something. I can't remember what it is, but it's something about sausages. If you say it backwards, it's Jesus loves you. And he always tries to subvert and put that in there, but he's mocking. You know, I just remember hearing, he said at one point, he's like, in an interview, somebody was talking about his mother. Is your mother proud of you? And he said this on a TV interview, and it made me cringe because I said the same thing 1,000 times, you know? Oh, Christ stole my mom's brain a long time ago, so I don't know what she thinks. You know? And by the way, I get it. I actually understand because I felt that way for a long time about my mom and how she chose her religion over me. That doesn't feel good, you know? But this whole notion that you take it out on... Here's the thing is, like, when you do that, when you overcorrect and you take it out on all Christians, it's an overcorrect. It's like, okay, yeah, your mom maybe could have been a little bit more understanding and caring, you know? But also, you're a cocky son of a bitch. I'm talking about me, and I'm talking about Mark. It's just like, how much do your parents owe you? At what point do they have to keep putting up with your shit if your point of view is that you're better than them, you're smarter than them, they're stupid, they're ignorant, beauty is dumb, ugly things are cool, I'm hardcore, man, I'm hardcore. At what point is it okay for your parents to just go, you know what? You go do your thing. Come back when you grow up. Anyway. Life is good. Things are beautiful. There's beauty everywhere you look. You can look at terrible things if you want to. You can focus on the war in Gaza. You can always find something terrible to focus on. And you can convince yourself that life is a burden. And maybe sometimes it feels that way, but guess what? I think life is a miracle, and I'm happy that I get to be alive, and I'm glad that I'm old now and I can enjoy Crystal Gale and Eddie Rabbit singing Just You and I together harmoniously without being mocked and made fun of by fucking Devo. unnecessary outro song to totally waste more